Hello everybody, welcome back to our crochet along for the gallery throw. I'm Brenda KB Anderson, and if you are new here, if you haven't seen the other squares so far, just so you know, we are working on square number 5 today. It is a Catherine wheel square, but we have already done 4 squares before this, and we had a little introduction in square number 1 about the blanket as a whole. So like all the materials you're gonna need and all that kind of stuff. So that, if you're looking for that information, you can find that in the download from lesson 1 if you wanna know exactly what yarn I'm using today, and the gauge, all that information for general instructions for the blanket would be in lesson number 1 so far. So we are working on lesson number 5, which is the Catherine wheel square. So you can go ahead and download your free pattern for the Catherine wheel square that we're going to be working up today. And just to give you kind of like the little overview of the blanket, just a really, really quick one. It's made up of 6 different styles of stitches in a bunch of different colorways. So none of the squares are exactly the same as each other. So I kind of designed this blanket for people like myself that don't like to make the same thing over and over and over. That's why it's kind of hard for me to complete a project this large. I wanted to change it up and keep it kind of fresh, and every square is just a little bit different. So there are 6 different styles of stitching. So meaning today is one of those 6. The Catherine wheel square, this is the one we're going to be working on. Here, let me turn it this way. We're going to be working on this square today. And so far we have done the bobble cable square here. And then second one we did was the log cabin square, which is this one. Then after that, we did the grain square, which is this one. And then last time we did this granny popcorn square right here, really textural and fun. So this time we're doing Catherine wheel, and then the next session, we're going to be working on this really cool square here. So just a little tiny preview of the next time we meet. And like I said, if you have any questions or you want to just check out, information about the blanket as a whole, check out lesson number 1. Also download that one too. All right, so we're going to be using worsted weight acrylic yarn like we've been using throughout, and I have an H hook, which is a 5mm hook, but you will use whatever size you need to get a gauge that you like, or something to match my gauge if you want your blanket to turn out the same size. So that's up to you. So we're going to be using 2 colors, contrasting colors today. And then we're going to be using a 3rd color just for the edging. So that's this kind of off-white color here. All right. So I did want to mention too, if you've worked the Catherine wheel stitch before, then you'll be very familiar with this square. But I did change up a couple of things from how I've seen other Catherine wheel stitches done, just on the edges of on the edges of the square. So if you're saying to yourself, why do these stitches look a little bit different? I'll kind of explain that as I get to it. But you are welcome to finish up to make your square just how you're used to making your Catherine wheel square. As long as you have the right amount of stitches, it'll turn out just fine. I just did some little tweaks on the side edges to the stitch pattern just because I felt like I was getting some little gaps that I didn't like. So I just want to give you guys a little heads up in case you are used to working in the stitch pattern. If you've never worked it before, then you are in the right place because I'm going to be showing you how to do it, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good learning experience. I also wanted to mention that some people have had questions and they're putting them in the chat box, which is awesome. And towards the end, I'm going to answer some of the questions that I saw previous to this morning. But I did want to point out, Jan has been making some comments in here, and she wanted to tell Lori how much she loves her squares. Now, Lori has been posting pictures on the Creative Crochet Corner website in the project gallery. So it's been really fun to track her progress. She's been using really bright, really bright kind of jewel pop colors, really fun color palette. So if you guys want to go over there and check that out, it's pretty awesome. But Jan is saying that she wanted to tell Lori how much she loves her squares and her comments too, because her experience is the same. She's been watching the videos over and over and sometimes crying. And she is saying, keep sending the squares as you do them. So I just wanted to point this out. I feel bad that you guys are having such a hard time, but sometimes that's what learning feels like. And I just want to say congratulations for pushing through that for Lori and for Jan. That is part of what crochet-alongs are about, in my mind at least, is to share your experiences. So when you're having a problem, somebody else is going to be having a problem with something too. And it's really good to share that so that you feel like, okay, it's not just me, and you can give each other, you know, some tips or things that you learned. Maybe you crochet differently than I, and you have a unique insight into something that really helped you, and you can share that with other people. So I just want to encourage you guys to go ahead and leave comments for things that really helped you out, or you know, questions. If you're having trouble, definitely ask me questions. Towards the end of this, I'm going to check back in and see if there are questions about this square, but also if you have questions on any of the previous squares. I did bring some of my half-made samples with me, so I should hopefully be able to demonstrate something if you're having a lot of trouble with the previous square as well. And I do have the patterns here for that too. So definitely put those in the chat if you've got questions. All right, so let's start out. One more thing I wanted to mention, and I've mentioned these in all the other lives too, is I really like working from charts. Charts really help me understand the relationship of the stitches to each other. And you don't need to know how to work from the chart. You can just follow along with my video, and there are also written instructions in your pattern. You can see here all the instructions have been completely written out. You don't have to look at the chart if you just do not like charts, that's fine. But for people like me who really appreciate the chart, I have charted out every square in this blanket, so you could even really just solely work from the charts if you wanted to. If sometimes reading through all the instructions is just a little overwhelming, and it can be kind of easy to lose your place. And whereas a chart, you can kind of see, it's a map of where you're going to be stitching and how the stitches relate to each other, and it can be really helpful for those of us who are very visual learners. So I'm going to be working from the chart today, but just know that all the directions of all the stitches and everything that I am going to be showing you, those are all, you know, in your pattern, so you don't have to work from this. All right, so to start out, we are going to be calling this sort of dusty greenish grayish color, that's going to be our main color for the square, and this sort of goldish color is going to be our contrasting color for the square. So we're going to start out with the main color, and we are going to begin by chaining 27 stitches. So we're going to make a slip knot, and then we're going to place that on our hook, and then we're going to chain 27. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oops, did I lose a stitch there? Let's see. 3, 6, 9. Okay. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. All right, then we're going to start by working into the bottom of our chain, which is how I usually begin working into any chain, almost always. You can work into the top of the chain if you prefer, that is fine. I find that working into the bottom of the chain leaves a really neat and tidy edge, and that is useful for working into later, but you can certainly do it if you just don't like working into the bottom of your chain. That is completely fine. You can just work into it how you regularly do. So I'm going to, right now, the top of the chain is here sitting upright with all the little V's stacked on top of each other. If we roll those over and we look at the bottom, there's all these little horizontal dashes across our chain. Those little horizontal dashes is where I'm going to be inserting my hook each time. So we're going to make, the first row is just a row of single crochet stitches. So right now, when we look at this chart, I know it's a little crazy, just try to ignore all of these, the purple, red, and orangey kind of colored pluses on the outside. Those we'll get to later. That is showing us what the border is later. Right now we're starting right here where this little arrow is, and we've chained all the way across here. There's our last chain, and you can see we're going to begin by working in the second chain from the hook, and we're going to do single crochets into each stitch across. These little plus signs are the single crochets, and you can find the key to what all these stitches are down here at the bottom of your page, just in case you forget. So we're going to start by skipping that first horizontal bar, or horizontal little dash there. Now we're going to insert our hook underneath the next one, and we'll yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. And if you're a newer crocheter, I always recommend that you just keep a stitch marker in the first stitch of your row. And You can also mark the last stitch of your row too if you're having trouble, and that will really keep you on track to make sure you're not missing stitches or skipping stitches or adding stitches. All right, so we're going to continue. We gain 1 single crochet into each of these horizontal dashes all the way across. So we'll have a total of 26 single crochets. I want to say good morning to Melanie Mestel. She said good morning to all of us. Hello, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. So I do want to point out too that I tried very hard to make sure that all these squares had the same amount of stitches around the outside of each of them for the border. But this square has some extra stitches along 2 of the sides, and I will show you that later. I just wanted to point that out in case anybody's watching this and they're, wondering what's going on with all these extra stitches, where before we would be stitching maybe like 22 or 24. Now we've got, 26 stitches across, and it's because of the way that the stitches are made. They kind of pull in a little bit more. We needed to have that amount of stitches to make our stitch pattern. And this is the right amount of repeats to create the square that's the size we need it to be. So this only affects you when you are sewing your squares together. You're just going to have to realize you're going to have some extra stitches along the bottom and the top of this square. So when you're stitching them together, just keep that in mind. It's not going to be a 1-to-1 ratio between this square and the next square. You're going to have more stitches along these 2 edges of the square, the top and the bottom. So that's just a little heads up. You don't need to worry about that, and I'll tell you guys all about that when we do lesson 7, which is where we do the finishing and we sew the pieces together. I just was anticipating maybe some people would be wondering why we have more stitches this time. Okay, so we've worked all the way across. We have our 26 single crochet. We've worked across to here. Now on row 2, which is right here, we're going to chain 2, and those 2 stitches do not count as a stitch, meaning they are just here along the side, and we are not going to work into them on the next row. Okay, so we're going to do chain 2, 1 and 2. We're going to turn our work like we're turning a page in a book, just like that. And now we are going to work into that very first single crochet, which is right here. We're going to do 4 double crochets into that same stitch. So to do a double crochet, you'll yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I'm going to place a stitch marker in that very first stitch. And then we're going to do 3 more double crochets into the very same place. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. One more. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now we have a total of 4 double crochets. Remember, we're not counting that original chain 2. That doesn't count as anything. Now we are going to skip 1, 2, 3 single crochet stitches. These 3 stitches don't have anything pointing to them. Okay, so that means we're skipping those 3 stitches, and then we're going to work 3 single crochets into the next, 1 into each of the next 3 stitches. All right, so we're going to skip 1, 2, and 3, and then in the following stitch, which is right here, we're going to work a single crochet, and then in the next stitch, another single crochet, and then in the next stitch, another single crochet. So our piece should look like this. We have kind of a little part of a shell, and then it kind of swoops down and we have some single crochet stitches down here. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we are going to skip 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. We're skipping 3 stitches in our row, and then we're going to work all of these double crochets. That's 7 double crochets into this 1 single crochet. So to start a double crochet, we're going to yarn over. Remember, we're skipping those 3 stitches, 1, 2, and 3. So in that next stitch right there, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now we're going to do 6 more of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Whoops, I accidentally put that 6th one in the stitch next to it. Let me try that again. There we go. 6. So you should have a total of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches into one stitch right there. So we just worked these 7 into the stitch. Then we're going to skip 1, 2, 3, and then do 3 single crochets and skip 1, 2, 3, and we're basically repeating this section again, okay? So we're skipping the next 3, 1, 2, 3, because our fan's going to reach across that, and then we're going to work 3 single crochets, 1 in this stitch, 1 in the next stitch, and 1 in the following stitch. Then we skip 3 more stitches, 1, 2, 3, and in the 4th stitch, we're going to do 7 more single crochet, or 7 more double crochets, sorry. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like we have a question here from Melissa. She is saying this is her first live and she just started 2 days ago. I heard you mention the size of the gauge will change the size. If I use a size 6, will it be bigger? So I'm guessing you mean a size 6 yarn, which is a jumbo, I'm guessing, or maybe you mean a hook. I'm not really sure. If you go up a hook size, it will make it larger. If you go up yarn thickness, it will be larger as well. So if you are unsure, and if I'm not answering this correctly, please pop back in and let me know. But if you are unsure if your hook and yarn size combination or your gauge is going to be, if you're just unsure of that whole situation, just make a square, or you can even just work on part of the square until you get partially done. And then you can measure across your square and see how it compares to my squares. Those are in lesson 1. I give you the measurement of the squares across. I think they're like, let me just take a little peek here. But if you compare what you're getting to what I'm getting, you'll know how that's going to affect the size of your blanket. So each square measures about 8 inches across. That's what I thought, but I couldn't remember. That was a while ago. So you'll just, as you get part of the way through your square, you can measure across and know that you're going to add that border to it. If it's a square that has a border like this one, it's going to get a little wider, but it'll give you sort of an idea about, you know, what size your blanket is going to be, because you can look at the layout and know how many squares across. If it's just a little bit bigger, your blanket will be bigger, but it won't be like crazy big. So the bigger the difference is, you know, if it's off by an inch, as you put all the squares across, because let's see, there's how many squares in each direction? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in one direction, and I think there's 6 in the other. So 5 times, if they were off by an inch, it would, you know, per square, it would be 5 inches bigger in one direction and 6 inches bigger in the other direction, if that helps. Just to kind of give you an idea. Oh, you meant the hook. Okay. Let's see. I think an H is, so are you asking about millimeter? If you're using a 6 millimeter hook, it will be bigger. If you're using a size 6 hook, I believe that is smaller. I think an H is a size 8 in the US sizes. I'm not 100% sure about that, but if you're talking about millimeters, your gauge will likely be bigger. However, we all crochet differently. So maybe you crochet tighter than how I crochet, so maybe it'll end up the same size. You won't really know how big your squares are until you start to actually just make part of a square and then just check it out and see what size it is. I mean, in lesson number 1, I do have a gauge swatch that's just working in single crochet compared to my single crochet working back and forth. I almost never do that in my patterns. I always like to give the gauge swatch in the pattern that I'm working in. But because we're making blankets that are only 8 inches across and you can't very easily divide up each square, I just chose to give a plain single crochet work back and forth so you get some kind of idea how it compares to my stitching. And then once you figure that out, if you're getting you choose a hook size where you can get a similar size gauge swatch to mine. And then once you do that, you can start working on a square. And then as you're working on the square, you can just see what size it's turning out to double check and just make sure that we're still on track. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's see. We're working across this row right here. We've already worked that second fan here, and now we're going to do 2 single crochets at the very end. So we're after that last stitch where we put all those double crochets in, that was right here, we're skipping 1, 2, 3 stitches, and then we're going to work a single crochet into each of the last 2 single crochets. So we skip 1, 2, 3, and then make a single crochet here, and then a single crochet into the next stitch, which is right here. All right, and then at that point, we are going to change colors. So now, most of the time when you see a pattern that changes colors, the designer will have you wait on doing that very last yarn over. So you still have your 2 loops on your hook, and then they'll have you yarn over with your new color and pull it up. Let me show you what that looks like, in case you want to do it this way. So most people will do it this way, and then they'll just pull their new color through, and then they will continue on with that because you've changed color for the next stitch, which will be just a chain 1 and then, oh wait, nope. It'll be 2 chains right here on the edge. So you'll just chain 2, okay, if that's how you're changing your color. When I do this, it tends to leave like a little bit of a hole here, which kind of bothers me. I'm just really particular about some things. So I devised a different way to do it, and you don't have to do it this way. You can do it the regular way, which is what I just showed you, which is, you know, waiting to the last yarn over of that last stitch in the old color, making your last yarn over with the new color and continuing with that. If you want to try doing it the way that I like to do it, this is how the instructions were written in your pattern. You will complete your stitch. Okay, so you completely finish it. You still have this loop of the old color just sitting there. Then you're going to yarn over with the new color and just pull that through the old color. And then you take the you take the yarn tail from the old color and you just pull on it until it disappears. So for me, that makes a slightly less noticeable hole right here, and that's why I do it. And it also makes a pretty tidy edge there, since you're basically pulling that down to nothing. You can really not even really see it. So up to you, however you want to do it. Doesn't really matter. But I just wanted to explain that, since I know that's different than how most other people change their colors at the end of a row. So I'm going to do 2 chains here, 1 and 2 in this new color. We're working on row 3 right here, so those are 2 chains right there. And then we are going to do a 1, 2, 3, 4 double crochet cluster. Let me make sure that's what I actually called it in here. Yes, 4 double crochet cluster. So that's where its definition is in your pattern. So all of these things I'm going to be talking about, there are step-by-step instructions to make that part of the stitch. I'm going to show you all of it anyway, but sometimes I know you just want to refer to something if you've watched the video and then you're just making it and you think, oh, I don't remember how to do that. It's in your pattern. You can check it out and I'll lead you through. All right, so we've chained 2 the beginning of our row 3. Then we're going to do this 4 double crochet clusters. So we're going to turn our work like we're turning a page in the book. And we are going to, it's kind of like making 4 double crochets, but we wait for the very last yarn over until the end. So we're going to yarn over, insert into that first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. Then we're going to do the same thing into the next stitch. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. Okay, 2 more times. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. So now we have a total of 5 loops on our hook, and we'll yarn over and pull through all 5 of those loops. So there's our 4 double crochet cluster right there. It's kind of gathering all those stitches up into one. Now, we're going to chain 3, and you can see in my chart, there's this funny little dot inside that chain. It looks sort of like an eyeball. The reason I did that was to remind myself that, to tell you to look at that first chain as you make it. It's going to make what I think of as the eye of the stitch. You'll see this will become a little bit more clear later as we move along through the pattern, but I'm just going to point that out right now. There's a little tiny dot in that chain for a reason. Pay attention when you make that stitch, because when we make this chain, so we're just going to yarn over and pull through, there's the first of the 3 chains. What that does is it brings it's the stitch where it looks like all these double crochets are leading into. It's right on the top of that. Really, the top of this 4 double crochet cluster is way over here. It's on the side, okay? And we do work into that later, but we are going to work more stitches into the eye. This is what I'm calling the eye. So that's created by the first chain after you make the 4 double crochet cluster. And this will be the same as we make the other clusters. I'll talk you through that as we go across the row. I just wanted to point out why that one's a little different. I'm just calling attention to it so you look at it when you create this, so you'll know where to put your hook when you work the next row. So we're going to do 2 more chains, 1 and 2. So there's a total of 3 chains after we do that cluster stitch. And then we're going to skip, let's see. So we've already worked into these first 2 double crochet when we did that cluster. Then we are going to work into the top center 3 of that fan here. We're going to work 3 single crochets, 1, 2, and 3 into the next 3 stitches. So we're not actually skipping a stitch. Sorry, I said we're going to skip, but I didn't mean we're skipping a stitch. We're just skipping to this section. Okay, so we worked into this stitch, so we're going to create a single crochet into the next stitch. There's 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, and 3 single crochets, just like that. And then we're going to chain 3, 1 and 2 and 3. And then we are going to work, basically what we're doing is we're working 7 stitches together. So it's like a 7 double crochet cluster right here. So we're gonna, this is very similar to the 4, but we're gonna be reaching into 7 stitches instead of just into 4. So we're gonna yarn over, insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. Now we've done 3 legs. We're gonna do 4 more. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we're going to yarn over and pull through all of those loops. Now that is a lot of loops to pull through. So try making these loops just a little bit more loosely than you normally would. And then when you pull through everything, you're going to pull your hook up. I'll show you that on the next one that we do, just so that they don't get caught. So now you can see we have this cluster, but it's not really pulled together at the top. This is the top of our stitch over here. That's the top of the cluster. So then when we make this chain, which is the one with the little dot in it, that's what actually looks like it's the top of this stitch. So we just make a chain right here. See how that brought everything together? And it really looks like this stitch is the top of the stitch, but it's really over here. So we're going to be working into that eye when we're going to place a bunch of stitches into that eye, and I just wanted to point out that it's not into the top of that cluster, it's actually into that first chain that you make after you make the cluster. This confused me for a very long time when I was working up the Catherine wheel stitch. I was so confused by that because I don't think I understood that this wasn't the top of the stitch, that this was actually the top of the stitch, and that we're actually working into that first chain. But some people, when they make the Catherine wheel stitch, they do actually work it all into the top of that stitch, and it's a little bit shifted over to the side. It gives you a slightly different look, but there's lots of variations in crochet, lots and lots of different kinds of Catherine wheel stitches. So I'm just letting you know some people do them a little differently. All right, so now we've chained 2 more stitches after that eye stitch that we did, that eye chain. And then we're going to work 3 single crochets, 1 into each of the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Then we'll chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to work a 7 double crochet cluster again. So yarn over, insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. And we're going to continue that 5 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to yarn over and pull through everything. And this is what I was talking about. When I do this, I yarn over and I'm pulling my hook up in this direction to stretch out those loops as much as I can. so that when they go through, my hook does not get stuck. And then we're going to chain 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3. The first of those is the eye, 1, 2, and 3. And then we are going to place a single crochet into each of the last 2 stitches. So 1 and 2, just like that. That's what our row looks like. And then we will chain 1 and turn our work. So we'll chain 1, turn like you're turning a page in a book, and we're going to continue with the same color. So in this, we switch after every 2 colors, we switch back and forth. And I also have in the directions not to cut your yarns, and we'll carry them up the side because we can work over them later. If that drives you crazy, you can absolutely cut them and weave them in. That is completely fine. I was taking the easy way out, so I'm just going to be stranding them right up the side, and then later on when we do the edging, we're going to crochet around that, and so we're going to cover that up so you won't even see it. Alrighty, so here we are on row 4. So we already chained 1 and turned, and then we're going to do a single crochet into each of the first 2 stitches, 1 and 2. Then we get to that chain space there. We're not working into the chain space, we're going to work into the eye of the stitch. Now this is what I was going on and on about on the last row. So you can see how all the stitches kind of gather up, and there's that teeny little eye right there that we made with that first chain. That's where we're going to be placing 7 double crochets. So we're going to yarn over, insert into the eye, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. There's the first one of 7. So we're going to do 6 more right into that same space. There's number 2, there's number 3, there's number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7. Okay, so they're all going to be radiating out of the same point. So on the row before, we made kind of the bottom of that circular shape, and on the top, we made the top half of that circular shape. All right, so then we are going to skip over this chain 3 right here. We're not going to work into it, and then we're going to work a single crochet into each of the next 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. We're going to skip over the chain 3, and we're going to work 7 double crochets into the next eye. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then we skip that chain 3 and work 3 single crochets, 1 into each of the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. We're going to skip this chain 3 right here. Right now we're right here, and we're going to work 3 double crochets into the eye, and then after that we're going to do another double crochet into the top of that cluster stitch. Let me show you what that looks like. So first we do the 3 double crochets into the eye, which is right here. It's where they all look like they come together. Okay? 1, 2, and 3. And then we are going to do a double crochet into the top of that cluster stitch right there. So that's right over here on the side. So that was actually the top of that cluster. We're going to do a double crochet right there. And that keeps the edge nice and straight. So normally you would work you could work all those double crochets into the eye, or some people work all of them into this stitch over here. And either way, I was getting a weird gap or kind of a jog here. So I kind of split it into 2 parts to this 4 double crochet situation. I put the first 3 double crochets into the eye, and then the 4th double crochet into the top of that cluster stitch from that row below. Okay? So that's one of those things I was talking about that's a little bit different than what I have seen other people do for the Catherine wheel stitch. I was just kind of fiddling with it to try and make my edges nice and straight there. So, all right, so now we are going to switch back to the other color because we've done 2 rows in this color. So we're going to switch back. So we're just going to drop this color, and we are going to pick up this color. So I'm just going to pull it up in front, and because of the way I like to change color, I actually did finish that stitch, and I'm going to yarn over with the new color right here, and then I am going to pull on the old color until that last loop just disappears. And this, you can see how I'm just bringing this old color here, the green color, I should say, this is the new color for this row, but this, the main color, that's what I should say. I'm bringing the main color up. There is a very long float here, it goes all the way from there to here, but we're gonna crochet over that later. You need to make sure though that it isn't like super long and it's gonna stick out and be weird. And you also don't want it to be too short because it's going to kind of cinch in the edge of your work and it's going to constrict it there, and we don't want to do that. All right, so now we are working on row number 5, which is right here. So we're going to chain 1 and we'll turn our work. And we're going to do a single crochet into each of the first 2 stitches, 1 and 2. And then we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is where we are on the chart. We did our 2 single crochets, and then we chained 3, and now we're going to do a 7 double crochet cluster right there. So we chained our 3, and now we're going to do the cluster. So there's the first leg, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th. We'll yarn over and pull through all of those loops, and then we're going to chain 3. 1, that creates the eye, 2 and 3, and then we'll do 3 single crochets into the top of this next group of 7 double crochets. So 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, because we have to reach over to center ourselves above this little valley in order to do that 7 double crochet cluster. So here's the first leg, 1 and 2, 3, 4. At number 4, you should be right at the bottom of that valley. 5, 6, 7. And then we yarn over, pull through all those loops, and chain 3. 1 creates the eye, 2 and 3. Then we're going to make a single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. And we are almost at the end here. We're right there. Actually, oh, we only do a chain 2 right here. I'm just going to point that out. I was just about to do chain 3. So we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2, because we want that chain to be a little shorter because we're doing this cluster a little further over. This is another one of those things I did to kind of modify it and make it a little straighter along the edge. So we're going to do a 3 double crochet cluster right there, followed by 1 double crochet in that last stitch. So to do the 3 double crochet cluster, we yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop, and then we repeat that 2 more times, once into each of the next 2 stitches. Just like that. We should have 4 loops on our hook. We'll yarn over, pull through all 4, and then we're going to end with a double crochet in the very last stitch right here. Just like that. Okay, so this is what our piece looks like so far. And then we will do row number 6. So we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2, and this should look very similar to, or this should be very familiar, sorry. Row number 6 is very similar to row number 2. It's just that we're working into different stitches. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here we've chained 2. We're going to turn our work, and we're going to be working row number 6. We're going to do 4 double crochets into that very first stitch. So that's into that eye there. 1, 2, 3, 4. When I said eye, okay, let me back up. So I've been telling you the eye is created by the chain that's after that cluster. Well, even if you have a double crochet after the cluster, it kind of creates an eye right here. See how all of those stitches look like they're going to that. So that's why I call that an eye. I know that was a little confusing. I'm sorry about that. But that double crochet is creating that sort of eye where everything leads to that little hole right there. So that's where we're going to be stitching. Okay, so let me back up here. So we chained our 2, we're starting row number 6, and we're going to make 4 double crochets into that very first double crochet of the row. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we are skipping our 2 chains here. We only had 2 chains last time. And then we're going to do 3 single crochets, one into each of the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. All right, so we're going to skip the chain 3 and we're going to create 7 double crochets all into that eye right there. So here's the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Just like that. And then we are going to skip over that chain 3 because our double crochet is just, you know, a way of knowing if you're skipping. Basically, you're never going to be working into those chains unless you're working a bunch of double crochets into one of the eye, you know, that first chain after you make a cluster stitch. But as just a general rule in the stitch pattern, you're not working into those chain spaces or into those chains with the exception of that eye. So your double crochets will reach across and be about as tall as those chains, and it'll reach you right over to this section of single crochets right here. As you work on this, you'll start to see, you know, how to read your stitches and how to know where you're supposed to do all these stitches. After you do a couple of, you know, repeats of this section, you'll be like, okay, I understand. I have to fill in the valleys, and then when I've filled in the valleys, I have to create sort of the little mountains. So right now we're on a mountain row. We're creating these little hills or mountains by working the 7 double crochets. So here's another group of 7 double crochets into that eye. Let's see, I've got 6, one more. And then that'll reach us on over to these last 2 single crochets, which are right here. We're working the end of row 6. We're going to do a single crochet into each of the last 2 stitches right there. And then we will change to the gold color because we just did 2 rows in the main color. So we're going to change back to the contrast color. So we're going to just drop that and bring up the gold color right in front. Just like that. We'll yarn over and then we'll pull on the old color. We'll pull on the old color. And then we'll take a look at our piece here. Row number 7 starts out with 2 chains. So we'll do 2 chains, 1, 2, just like that. And then we'll turn our work. And I'll just do part of this row because I've actually already shown you this. And row number 7 is the same as row number 3 here. So we've already started doing our repeats of the Catherine wheel stitch pattern, and you already know most of what you need to know for this square. So I'll just do a couple of these little clusters so you can remember how to do it. So we're going to start off with a 4 double crochet cluster at the beginning of row 7, yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. That's the first leg. Second, third, and fourth. See how we're filling in that little valley there? We're going to yarn over and pull through everything. And then we're going to chain 3. The first one makes the eye, and then there's 2 more. And those chains will reach us over so that we can get to the next 3 stitches. And we're just going to do 3 single crochet because we're at the top of one of those little hills here. So we're just doing single crochets because this is a row. I like to think of it as a filling in or a kind of a flattening row where we fill in stitches into those valleys, and then we just do single crochets at the tops of the little hills there. Okay, so you would just continue working in the stitch pattern until and going through your repeats. So right now we're on number 7, and you would continue all the way through. You're going to do another repeat of that, a repeat of row 3. See how 3, 7, and 11 are the same. Then you do 2 more rows. So this one would be the same as row 8. And this one would be the same as row 9 right here. So you're going to end with a repeat of row 9, which is actually a repeat of row 5. Okay, so 5, 9, and 13 all look the same. All right, so after you've finished that, let's see. Oh, here's my piece. Your piece will look like this. Here is where we've ended up. See, that last row will be a filling in row, and you'll be doing it in the main color. And then you'll just cut your yarn and fasten off. Whoops, and fasten off. And you just need enough to weave in your ends. It doesn't need to be as long as this. So after you do that, we are going to join the main color down here in this corner, and we're going to work single crochet around 3 sides. And someone had asked in a previous lesson like why I did that, because I did that on at least one more square where I didn't work all the way around. And the reason is because I am using this to create a neat and tidy edge to stitch into with the off-white, but I'm also using this to get this to the right size so that once we add the border, the square will be the correct size. So if you look at this, it's just ever so slightly wider. And what we need to do is just add a section along here to cover up here and to cover up here. And we do want that extra single crochet row across the top, because that's going to balance it out. See, right here we started with a single crochet row, and here we just have this thin little chain 3. We need to add that extra single crochet here, but we don't want to keep adding more length to it, because then it's going to get too long, and then it's not going to be symmetrically balanced. There's going to be too many rounds down here of the main color if we went all the way around, if that makes sense. So that's why we're just going to be going around this edge, and this edge, and then we're going to switch to the white color. So let's see. We are doing a single crochet. In another lesson, we did a slip stitch along here, which works great, but I wanted to do the single crochet so I could cover up and crochet around these yarn ends right here. So you're going to grab your main color, which was the color that you started with, and you're going to start in the bottom corner, which is over here. So you ended here. This was our last stitch. You're going to start directly opposite that in the corner, and you're going to work across this way. Okay? So I'm going to turn my work so you can see that a little better. And I'm going to place a stitch marker at the halfway point between this corner and this corner. So I'll just fold that in half, place a stitch marker here, and that's going to tell us we're at our halfway point. So when we're working across, we work 20 stitches all the way across. So that means we work 10 here and then 10 here. So that'll be a good little checkpoint for us to figure out if we're putting our stitches close together enough or too far apart or whatever. Okay, so we're gonna just pull up a loop in this corner, and I'm gonna chain 1, and that doesn't count as anything. And then I'm going to be working single crochets all the way across this edge. So 1, 2, and I'm just placing my hook wherever it makes sense. There isn't a very specific spot I want you to insert your hook. Just insert your hook there, and if it makes a big ugly gap, then take your hook back out and place it someplace else. It's just sort of trial and error as you get used to stitching along the row ends of things. All right, so we've got 3 so far, 4, 5. So let's just take a peek. Looks like we're about halfway along our 10 there, so that's good. And then we'll do 5 more until we get to the stitch marker. 1, 2, making sure that we're stitching around those extra floats here. 3, let's see if I can get my hook in there. If it's a tight squeeze, usually it looks better. 4 and 5. If it's a very loose space, you might think, oh, I'll just fill that in with a stitch. But if it's already loose, then you stitch into it, it always makes it bigger, and then it doesn't look so good. All right, so we've got 10 stitches here, and we're going to do that again right over here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's about halfway from the center to the corner. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right. So now, as we're working across the top here, this is actually, this is the top of our row here. The top of our square. We're just gonna be working 1 single crochet into each stitch across. So 1, 2, 3, and you could work into your chain space. You could work 3 stitches into your chain space, but I find that it looks a little neater if I can actually work into the tops of those stitches there instead of working into the chain space. It just kind of spreads out the stitch a little bit more. And I feel like it looks a little bit better. It lays a little nicer. Just like this. Some of them are, so on your last row, I should have mentioned this before as I was doing it. If you make those chain 3 spaces just a little bit looser, just keep in mind that you're going to be working actually into those chains on this very last, on the setup row. Or partial round, or whatever we want to call this, in the main color. You do have to work into those chain stitches, so just be mindful of that when you're doing that last row in your stitch pattern, because it can, chains can get a little tight to work into if you're not paying attention, not intentionally making them loosely. All right, you're almost all the way to the next corner, and then we are going to repeat what we just did on the first edge, and we're going to repeat that on the second edge here to make that edge look nice and tidy and the same as its opposite edge. There we go, we made it to the corner, and now we are going to do 10 stitches to the middle point, and then 10 to the opposite corner. These are just single crochet stitches, plain single crochet stitches all the way across. And because there's this yarn tail here in a matching color, you could choose to just crochet over that, like I'm doing here. Four and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We've gotten to the marker, and now we're going to do 10 more stitches to the next corner. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you guys are sitting on any questions about any of the squares, let me know. Put them in the comments, please, and then I will hopefully be able to get to them before the end of this. But I am just going to finish up getting to this corner, and then I'm going to begin showing you the edging. I'm not going to work the entire thing, but I think that I'll be showing you enough so that you can go ahead and complete your square. I should be able to answer any questions in the partial round here. So then you just fasten off. When you get to that opposite corner, you should have worked in each stitch across the top, and then on each of these 2 edges you'll have 20 stitches. Mine looks like it needs to be blocked a little bit. I think I pulled it a little bit tightly along that one edge. It's kind of a little shorter, but blocking will totally fix that. If you don't know what blocking is, I will be going through that in lesson number 7, but basically it is just a way to kind of make sure that all your squares are even and looking good and to the right size. All right, so this is where we ended over here. So then we are going to, let's see, this is where we will start at the bottom, right where we ended off, and we're going to be working in single crochet all the way around the whole box now, but in this white color. So that's going to create that edging. That's what we use to stitch our squares together. So I'm going to turn this upside down. So this is where we ended. I'm going to turn it upside down. And on that last stitch, you could just go ahead and change to this new contrasting color if you want to, or you can just pull up a loop right next to where you ended off, just like that, and chain 1, and then begin working around. So we are going to be creating 1 stitch into each of the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches. Then we're going to single crochet 2 together, and that might seem weird, but it's because we're trying to counteract this little dip thing that happens. It looks like we have too many stitches here, and we do have more stitches than what we wanted, so we're going to kind of get rid of some of those stitches to make this edge a little straighter across. So we've got 9 stitches, and then we do a decrease. Wait, was it 10? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then a decrease. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to confuse you. All right, so here's the first stitch. That was just where we pulled up a loop. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if you don't want to count those, that's okay. Basically, you just single crochet in 1 stitch across until you get to this little, like right below the eye, and then you're going to single crochet the next 2 stitches together. So place your hook under the front loop in the next stitch and under both loops of the following stitch. Yarn over, pull your loop through both of those stitches, yarn over and pull through 2. Or you can do any kind of single crochet 2 together that you'd like to. If you don't like the one that I'm using here, you can do a different one, and I'll show you that all again in just a minute. So then we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so let's see. There was our decrease. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now we're going to single crochet 2 together, and however you'd like to do it. I like to place my hook under the front loop of the next stitch and under both loops of the following stitch. I yarn over, pull up a loop through both of the stitches, and then I yarn over and pull through 2. You know, I'm going to try and place this on top of something that's a little bit darker. Let's see, maybe I will work with this behind it so you guys can see a little better what I'm doing. All right, and then we're gonna single crochet to the corner here. And then when you get to the corners and you're going to start working across, just know that we're doing an increase here and an increase at the corner when we're working across those 20 stitches. So we'll do it in the first of those 20 stitches, and in the 20th stitch as well, we'll do an increase. So that just means we're doing 2 single crochet stitches into the first stitch. So 1 and 2, and then we're going to do 18 more stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. We've reached the next corner, and we're going to do 2 single crochets into that next stitch. Okay? And I'm going to point out, because I'm not going to get all the way around the following round, but I'm just going to show you that we're going to do another. So what we've done so far, this purple partial round, that was the setup round that we did in the main color in these purple little plus signs here. Then we started here and we started working across the bottom of our piece, and we are working in the white. We worked across here, did a decrease, worked across here, decrease, worked across here, and then we worked, now we are working across here. And this is where we are starting to work our increases. So there's an increase right here when we work into that stitch, and all the way on the end, there's 2 stitches that go into this 1 stitch. So there's another increase here. So we are not increasing. In fact, we are decreasing when we're working these 2 edges. So you can see a decrease here, 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 and here. but we are increasing on the corners when we work these side stitches, just so that the corners of our piece can be flat. And then when we do the next round, which is what I was talking about, I'm not going to be able to get all the way around to show you, but just note that there are 2 stitches in row 2 of this contrasting color. In row 2 of this white, there are 2 stitches into that edge stitch, or into that corner stitch right there, and there are 2 stitches into this corner stitch right here. So we are increasing on both ends right here of the 2 sides, okay, but not any increases across the top or the bottom. That second round, we're just working straight across, all right? So I'm just going to continue a little bit further just to explain a little bit more. So here I've done my increase for the side, and now I'm working all the way across the top. So that's right here. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then do a decrease. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to make a decrease right here. And then we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then a decrease. And again, it doesn't really matter as long as you have a couple of decreases along this row to kind of straighten the edge out a little bit. It doesn't really matter where you put them. I just feel like since there's this little jog kind of where that eye is, and it's mirroring these, that we just put the decreases near where the eyes are of those cluster stitches, okay? So, but you know, it doesn't have to be, if you're just like, oh, I'm so done with counting, I don't want to count anymore, that's fine. You can just work your way across until you get to that point where it kind of dips in. You can see it wants to dip in right there. And then you can do a decrease right there. Just like that. All right, and then you'll work all the way across to the corner. And then when you get to the next corner, to this corner rather, you're going to do 2 single crochets into the first, so there's 20 stitches across here. So you'll do an increase, which is 2 single crochets here, and you'll do an increase here as well. So there's our increase, and then we'll work all the way across until we get to the other end. And then do an increase on our last stitch. And after this, I'll just kind of explain one more time about that last round, because I won't have time to complete that round. But I did want to answer just another question that somebody had earlier. Actually, 2 quick questions. Okay, so here's that last stitch. So we're going to do 2 single crochets into the last stitch. And then you can slip stitch to join to that very first stitch. You can do a slip stitch here to join, and then you'll chain 1, and then you're going to continue with the very same stitch that you did your slip stitch in. And remember how I said across the top and the bottom we're not increasing, so you're going to work all the way across to the corner, and then when you get to this side you'll do an increase here, work straight across, increase here. Then you'll turn your work 1 stitch into each stitch all the way across, and then the same thing, you'll do an increase here, work all the way across, and an increase in the very last stitch, slip stitch join, and fasten off. And if you're planning on sewing them together, instead of crocheting them together, you can leave yourself a long yarn tail so you can sew all these squares together. All right, so I do want to answer, like I said, I wanted to answer a couple of questions. Oh, look, there's a bunch more questions that just popped up. Okay. All right, looks like, okay, Melanie is saying, I've been playing catch up this morning, but I'm enjoying the wonderful squares. I like the squares because they're simple to do anywhere and they don't usually take a lot of time. Thank you for this. Yes, you are welcome. And that's how I feel about it too. That's how I trick myself into finishing a blanket, because to be honest, I've never made a full-size large crocheted blanket before. It's just been a challenge for me to keep myself engaged and to actually finish it. So I thought if I do a little bit at a time, I won't even notice. Elaine is saying hello, and she always wanted to master this. I'm assuming you're talking about the Catherine wheel stitch, and that I am glad that you're here, and I hope that my tutorial was helpful for you. and somebody is saying, oh, someone's saying it's the best tutorial on Catherine wheel stitch. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really had to dissect the stitch in order to teach it. That's one thing about doing this, is I really have to know exactly what I'm talking about, because I'm going to be teaching you guys. So it's making me learn things like, I can't just kind of look at it and be like, I think the stitch goes there, and then move on, and if it looks right, I keep going. I have to like really dissect and understand where my stitches are. So I hope that this was helpful for other people too, because it took me a very long time to figure this one out. I don't know why it was so complicated to me, but. And Carol is saying she loves the square, but it'll be a challenge. Yes, you are. And she says, thank you. You are welcome. Yeah, all of the squares in this blanket are a little bit of a challenge. There's nothing that's just like absolutely super duper, brand new beginner, but I hate recommending, for people to wait. If they're excited about it, it's just a square and you can always take it apart, and that's just completely fine. That's the thing about yarn, is you can just take it apart and redo it and learn as you go. So, and I did want to address, there was a question here from Kathy. She was saying she wanted to advance her skills on her crochet techniques, and she has difficulty selecting complementary colors. So she found an acrylic number 4 medium worsted ombre yarn color that she thought was pretty. And with that said, do you think that I could use that variegated style for all the squares and one contrasting color for the border? So yes, you can absolutely use that, but just know when you do that, it might be a little bit confusing on some of the squares when I'm switching to another color. Sometimes it's easier to see if you are also switching to another color. It's easier to keep track of where you're at. Like for example, on this stitch pattern, if you're doing this whole section in a variegated yarn, which you can do, you're going to lose some of these circular shapes. It's not going to be as distinct, but it might be really cool. So I don't want to discourage you from doing it. I just want you to start working on it and just be looking, maybe do a little sample of some of the squares that involve multiple colors, just to see if you like what's happening there. So of course, you can do any of these squares in all just one color or one ombre kind of yarn. That would work too, but it will not look, it will have a very different look to it than compared to mine. But it could be really, really cool. So it's just a little bit more of an unknown. It depends on how quickly your colors change and where they're changing in relation to the stitches that you're making. There's just so many variables. But that's the cool thing about crochet, is you can change, if you change up the yarn just even a little bit, sometimes it looks wildly different than somebody else's project, and it's really, really fun to see that, just to see all the variety of the things that you can make, just by changing the yarn and nothing else really. So I would say yes, you can do it, but maybe do a couple little samples, smaller bits, or just keep your eye on the square as you're working it. Another tip I had for you is, if you really like those colors, if you're not sure about choosing colors, you don't really know what colors go together, you can always look for the ombre colors section in the store, and then you can walk around with that and try to find colors that match each of the colors that are in that ombre yarn, because chances are you'll like how those look together as solid colors. So you could just use that as sort of a cheat sheet to pick out colors that kind of look nice together, since you saw the ombre and you thought that those colors looked good together. You may like them together if they're a bunch of solid colors that all match the different colors in the ombre yarn. So that's just another idea that I had too. Let's see, I want to make sure. And then, okay, so Debbie Brewer had a question on edging round 2 instructions. Should the end of the repeat be 2 single crochet in the next stitch instead of single crochet in the next stitch? The chart shows 2 single crochets at the beginning and the end of the repeat. Am I just reading it wrong? I'm guessing you're not reading it wrong. I'm not exactly sure which square you're talking about, because this happened before this lesson. So I will have to go back through and look at that. But if anybody is watching this and they're having the same problem, go by what's on the chart. If there's a discrepancy between the chart and what I said in the written directions, I may have had a typo there, and go by what's on the chart, because those are for sure right. If there was a typo, I can see when I'm looking at the chart how all the stitches line up, and I know that it's correct. But when I am writing something out, with a bunch of abbreviations, sometimes things get missed. And I do have a really, really awesome tech editor, and she catches almost everything, but there's just so much information. It's like, if anybody's human, you're going to miss stuff every once in a while. So between me and her, maybe we missed something there. So I'll have to go back and look at that. But if you're wondering whether the chart is correct or the written directions in this project, definitely go with the chart. So whatever edging that was, I'll have to, or if Debbie, if you see this later and you can pop back in and clarify which square you were talking about, that'll help me find my mistake quicker. All right, I think I'm caught up. I just want to thank you guys so much for joining me. It's really fun. It's fun to see your squares. And I'm excited that you guys are working along with me and making, your own blankets. That's very cool. So thank you so much. Please join me for next time for the next square. And then after that, we're going to be doing the finishing. So we're getting very near the end. And I look forward to sharing all that with you guys. So thank you so much and take care. Goodbye.